The Road to Unfreedom by Timothy Schneider is a compelling analysis of the political landscape in Europe, the United States, and Russia, offering a critical look at the forces shaping the contemporary world. Schneider, a renowned historian known for his works on the history of Eastern Europe and the Holocaust, examines the ways in which democracy has been eroded and how illiberal forces are rising across the globe. In his book, Schneider provides a historical context to the current political situation and explores the factors that have led to the erosion of democratic values and the rise of authoritarianism. The decline of democracy and the rise of illiberalism. Schneider begins his book by identifying a growing phenomenon, the shift from democratic governance to authoritarian rule, which he argues has been accelerating in recent years. This trend is not confined to any one country, but instead reflects a larger global issue. He examines the influence of Russian politics, particularly under Vladimir Putin, and the ways in which these forces have affected the political trajectory of Europe and the United States. The central argument of The Road to Unfreedom is that the road to unfreedom is a long and subtle process, where the dismantling of democratic institutions and the normalization of authoritarian practices occur gradually. Rather than an outright overthrow of democracy, Schneider emphasizes that the erosion of liberty happens in stages by undermining the rule of law, stoking fear, and creating divisions within societies. This shift occurs over time, often aided by political leaders who exploit crises to consolidate power, and is facilitated by a shift in the public's trust in institutions. Schneider points to Russia's role as a major force in spreading this illiberal model. Under Putin's regime, Russia has increasingly embraced an authoritarian approach, suppressing dissent, curbing media freedoms, and eroding democratic processes. Russia's involvement in Eastern Europe and its support for far-right groups across the continent is seen by Schneider as a deliberate attempt to export this model of governance. Through cyber warfare, disinformation campaigns, and financial backing of political movements, Russia has sought to destabilize Western democracies and promote autocratic rule as a viable alternative. The Politics of Eternity. A significant portion of the book focuses on what Schneider calls the politics of eternity, a concept that refers to the ideologies and practices aimed at restoring a supposed past glory. This approach contrasts this with the politics of progress, which is the idea that societies can evolve and improve over time. The politics of eternity is characterized by an emphasis on national identity, nostalgia for a past era, and an authoritarian approach to governance. Schneider uses the example of Putin's Russia to illustrate how the politics of eternity is implemented. Putin's focus on restoring Russia to its former imperial grandeur, invoking the history of the Soviet Union, and appealing to traditional Russian values is an example of how nostalgia for a particular historical period can be used to legitimize an authoritarian regime. This view rejects the idea of progress and suggests that the past is the only path forward. This longing for a mythical, idealized version of the past is what Schneider argues is behind much of the political rhetoric we see today in both Russia and many Western countries, including the United States. In the United States, Schneider traces the rise of the politics of eternity to the election of Donald Trump, whose Make America Great Again slogan is a clear appeal to nostalgia for a past era. Trump's rhetoric, often tinged with xenophobia and nationalism, echoes the same kind of yearning for a golden age that Schneider sees in Putin's rhetoric. This kind of political language appeals to people who feel disillusioned by modernity and are looking for a way to return to a more stable, familiar past. Schneider argues that the politics of eternity is dangerous because it discourages critical thinking and the ability to imagine a better future. Instead of focusing on the real challenges of the present, it relies on the fantasy of a return to an idealized past, which is often rooted in myths and selective memories. This longing for the past is not only misguided but also dangerous, as it allows authoritarian leaders to manipulate public sentiment and justify policies that undermine democratic values. The role of disinformation. A key element of Schneider's analysis is the role of disinformation in the rise of illiberalism. The spread of false information, often through social media platforms, has been a powerful tool in manipulating public opinion and undermining trust in democratic institutions. Schneider discusses how disinformation campaigns have been used to sow division, spread fear, and discredit democratic processes. Russia's involvement in disinformation campaigns is central to Schneider's argument. He highlights the role of the Internet Research Agency, a Russian organization that has been responsible for numerous online influence operations aimed at destabilizing Western democracies. These efforts have included the spread of fake news, the promotion of conspiracy theories, and the targeting of vulnerable populations with divisive messages. Schneider argues that these campaigns are part of a larger strategy to undermine faith in democratic institutions and promote the idea that autocracy is a more stable and effective form of government. Disinformation is also a powerful tool in eroding the rule of law. By spreading lies and creating confusion, disinformation campaigns can make it difficult for citizens to discern truth from falsehood. This contributes to a climate of distrust, where people are less likely to believe in the legitimacy of elections, the impartiality of the courts, or the accuracy of the media. In this environment, authoritarian leaders are able to manipulate the narrative and maintain control over the public discourse. The attack on the rule of law. The erosion of the rule of law is another central theme in The Road to Unfreedom. Schneider argues that the foundation of any democratic society is the rule of law, which ensures that power is distributed evenly and that everyone, including political leaders, held accountable under the law. However, in many countries, the rule of law has been gradually undermined, often with the support of authoritarian leaders who seek to concentrate power in their own hands. In Russia, the rule of law has been systematically dismantled, with political opponents imprisoned, journalists silenced, and the courts used to punish those who challenge the government. Schneider points out that the erosion of the rule of law in Russia is not a new phenomenon, but part of a long-standing trend that dates back to the Soviet era. Under Putin, this trend has only accelerated, as the government has increasingly relied on force and intimidation to maintain control. In the United States, Schneider argues that the rule of law has also been under threat, particularly during the Trump administration. Trump's attacks on the judiciary, the media, and law enforcement institutions have raised concerns about the integrity of the American legal system. The politicization of the courts, the undermining of investigative agencies like the FBI, and the constant barrage of misinformation have all contributed to a climate of uncertainty and distrust. This has made it more difficult for citizens to have confidence in the justice system, which is a fundamental pillar of any democracy. The road ahead. Schneider's book concludes with a call to action. While the forces of liberalism may seem powerful, Schneider argues that there is still hope for the future if citizens and political leaders can reassert their commitment to democratic values. He emphasizes the importance of defending the rule of law, protecting the independence of the judiciary, and ensuring that elections are free and fair. He also stresses the need for a more informed public, one that can critically evaluate the information they are presented with and resist the influence of disinformation. Schneider's analysis is not one of despair but of urgency. He argues that the current moment in history presents an opportunity to reaffirm the principles of liberty, equality, and justice. While the road to unfreedom may seem long, Schneider suggests that the road to freedom is still open to those who are willing to fight for it. In The Road to Unfreedom, Timothy Schneider offers a powerful and insightful critique of the political forces threatening democracy in the modern world. By examining the rise of authoritarianism, the politics of eternity, and the role of disinformation, Schneider provides a clear picture of the challenges facing democratic societies. At the same time, he offers hope for the future, encouraging citizens to stand up for their rights and defend the values that have made democracy a powerful force for good in the world.